The cold cut through Adelaide's traveling cloak like a blade as she stepped off the train in Aspen, Colorado, her breath forming white clouds in the December air of 1883. She clutched her small carpet bag tighter, scanning the platform for the man who had sent for her, the man whose letters had been her only comfort during the long journey from Boston, the man she was supposed to marry though they had never met. The platform was nearly empty save for a few bundled figures hurrying toward the warmth of buildings. Adelaide's heart hammered against her ribs as she realized she had no idea what Nathan Vaughn looked like beyond the vague description in his letters. Tall, he had written, with dark hair and work-roughened hands. That could describe half the men in the West. Miss Adelaide Reeves. A deep voice came from behind her, and she spun around, nearly losing her footing on a patch of ice. The man who stood before her was indeed tall, easily over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his heavy wool coat. His hair was dark brown, almost black, and fell to just above his collar beneath a wide-brimmed hat dusted with snow. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, a warm brown that seemed at odds with the harsh winter landscape around them. They held a kindness she had not expected, a gentleness that made something in her chest ease just slightly. "Yes, I am Adelaide Reeves," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "Are you Nathan Vaughn?" "I am." He reached for her bag, and she noticed his hands were indeed roughened by work, the hands of a man who knew labor. "Welcome to Aspen. I apologize for the weather. It came on sudden this morning." As if to emphasize his words, the wind picked up, sending a flurry of snowflakes swirling around them. Adelaide shivered despite her layers, and she saw concern flash across Nathan's face. "My wagon is just over here. We need to get you somewhere warm." He placed a hand at the small of her back, guiding her carefully across the icy platform. The touch was respectful, nothing improper, but Adelaide felt the warmth of it even through her thick clothing. The wagon was indeed close, a sturdy vehicle with a canvas cover stretched over wooden ribs. Nathan helped her up onto the seat with a steadying hand, then climbed up beside her. He tucked a heavy blanket around her lap before taking up the reins. "How far is your ranch?" Adelaide asked as they started moving. The cold was intensifying, and the sky had taken on a grayish quality that promised more snow. "About 5 miles out of town. Under normal circumstances, it is an easy drive, but with this weather coming in, it might take us longer." He glanced at her, and she thought she saw worry in his expression. "I did not expect you to arrive during a storm. The letter said you would be here next week." "I managed to catch an earlier train," Adelaide explained. "I sent a telegram, but perhaps it did not arrive in time." "No, I received no telegram." Nathan's jaw tightened slightly. "If I had known, I would have been better prepared. I would have made arrangements to keep you in town until the weather cleared." Adelaide looked around at the landscape as they left the small downtown area behind. The mountains rose on all sides, majestic and imposing, their peaks disappearing into low clouds. Everything was white or gray, beautiful in a stark way but undeniably hostile. She had grown up in Boston, where winters were cold but civilization was thick around her. This was different. This was wild. "How long have you lived here?" she asked, partly to distract herself from the growing cold and partly because she wanted to know more about this man she had agreed to marry. 5 years. I came out from Missouri after my father passed. He left me enough money to buy some land and start a small cattle operation." Nathan kept his eyes on the road, which was becoming harder to distinguish from the surrounding terrain as snow began to fall more heavily. "It has been good land to me. Hard work, but good." "Do you live alone?" The question came out before Adelaide could stop it, and she felt heat rise to her cheeks despite the cold. "I do." There is a neighboring ranch about 3 miles east, the Morrison place. Good people. They have been helpful, especially that first year when I was still learning." He paused, then added quietly, "It has been lonely, though. That is why I wrote to the agency." Adelaide nodded, understanding. She had her own reasons for responding to a mail-order bride advertisement. After her father's death 2 years ago, she had been living with her aunt in Boston, working as a seamstress. It was a respectable position, but her aunt made it clear that Adelaide was a burden, another mouth to feed. When her aunt had begun pushing her toward marriage with a much older widower who looked at Adelaide in ways that made her skin crawl, she had known she needed to find another path. The advertisement had been simple. Rancher in Colorado seeking a wife. Must be willing to work hard and endure isolation. She had written to the address provided, and Nathan's response had been thoughtful and honest. He had not promised her riches or an easy life, but he had promised respect and partnership. That had been enough. The wind was picking up now, and visibility was decreasing rapidly. Adelaide could barely see 20 feet ahead of them. Nathan leaned forward, his body tense as he guided the horses. The animals were becoming nervous, tossing their heads and snorting. How much farther? Adelaide had to raise her voice to be heard over the wind. "Another 3 miles, maybe less." Nathan's voice was tight with concentration. "This is turning into a proper blizzard. I am sorry, Adelaide. I should have insisted we stay in town." "You could not have known," she said, though her own worry was growing. She had heard stories about people freezing to death in storms like this, lost between their barns and their houses, disoriented in the white chaos. They pressed on, the horses struggling through snow that was now several inches deep and accumulating fast. Adelaide's feet were numb despite her boots, and she had pulled the blanket up to her chin, but the cold seemed to seep through everything. She found herself leaning closer to Nathan, seeking his warmth, and he shifted slightly to shelter her from the worst of the wind. "There." Nathan's voice held relief, and Adelaide squinted through the snow to see a dark shape emerging from the white. As they drew closer, she could make out a house, single-story but solidly built, with a barn nearby. Smoke rose from the chimney before being whipped away by the wind. Nathan drove the wagon right up to the front door, then jumped down and came around to help Adelaide. Her legs were so cold that they barely held her when her feet touched the ground, and she would have fallen if Nathan had not caught her, his arm strong around her waist. "I have got you," he said, and half carried her to the door, kicking it open and bringing her inside. The warmth hit her like a physical thing, and Adelaide gasped. The main room of the house was dim but blessedly warm, with a fire burning in a large stone fireplace. Nathan guided her to a chair near the hearth and began unwrapping her from her cloak and blankets. "I need to see to the horses," he said, his face creased with concern as he looked at her pale features. "Will you be all right for a few minutes?" Adelaide nodded, though her teeth were chattering too hard to speak. Nathan grabbed a thick quilt from somewhere and wrapped it around her shoulders, then added more wood to the fire, building it up until the flames roared. "I will be as quick as I can." Then he was gone, cold air rushing in briefly before the door closed behind him. Adelaide huddled in the chair, holding her hands out to the fire. Feeling was starting to return to her fingers and toes, bringing with it a painful tingling. She looked around the room, taking in her new home. It was simple but clean, with whitewashed walls and sturdy furniture. There was a cooking area against one wall with a good iron stove, a table with 4 chairs, and a few other pieces of furniture. 2 doors led off the main room, presumably to bedrooms. The house felt masculine but not unwelcoming. There were no decorative touches, No curtains or tablecloths or any of the small feminine details that made a house a home, but it was solid and well built. She could make it a home, Adelaide thought. She could make a life here. Nathan returned about 10 minutes later, his coat covered in snow and his face red from the cold. He shook himself off outside before coming in, then quickly closed the door against the storm. "The horses are settled," he said, pulling off his gloves and hat. "This storm is getting worse." "We made it just in time." He came over to the fire, holding his own hands out to warm them, and looked at Adelaide with concern. "How are you feeling?" "Warmer," Adelaide said, and it was true. The fire was doing its work, heat seeping back into her bones. "Thank you for getting us here safely." "I am just glad we made it." Nathan ran a hand through his dark hair, and Adelaide noticed it was damp with melted snow. "Let me make you something hot to drink. Coffee or tea? Tea if you have it." He nodded and moved to the kitchen area, filling a kettle from a pump at the sink and setting it on the stove. His movements were efficient, a man used to caring for himself. Adelaide watched him, this stranger who was to be her husband, and tried to imagine the life they would build together. "When were you thinking we would marry?" The question came out more bluntly than she had intended, but Nathan did not seem offended. "I thought we might take a few days, give you time to settle in and make sure this is truly what you want." He pulled down a tin of tea and 2 cups. "The preacher is in town. When you are ready, we can go in and make it official." "That is kind of you," Adelaide said, touched by his consideration. Many men in his position would have insisted on an immediate marriage. "But practical. I mean, with me staying here." Nathan's ears went slightly red, and he focused very intently on preparing the tea. "I will sleep in the barn until we are married. It would not be proper otherwise." "In the barn?" Adelaide sat up straighter. "But the storm. You cannot possibly sleep in the barn in this weather." "I have blankets, and there is hay for insulation. I will be fine." The kettle began to whistle, and he poured hot water over the tea leaves. "Your comfort and reputation are more important than my convenience." Adelaide felt something warm bloom in her chest that had nothing to do with the fire. This man, this stranger, was willing to sleep in a barn in a blizzard to protect her reputation. What kind of man did that? "Nathan," she said softly, and he turned to look at her, teacup in hand. "Could we perhaps go to town tomorrow if the weather clears and marry then?" "It seems foolish for you to risk your health when we are already planning to marry." He crossed to her and handed her the cup, and their fingers brushed. Adelaide felt that touch all the way to her core. "Are you certain?" Nathan asked, his brown eyes searching hers. "I do not want you to feel pressured." "I am certain." And as she said it, Adelaide realized it was true. There was something about this man that made her feel safe, that made her believe his promise in his letters to treat her with respect and kindness. "I did not come all this way to trap you in your own barn." A slow smile spread across Nathan's face, transforming it from merely handsome to something that made Adelaide's breath catch. "Then tomorrow it is, weather permitting. Tonight, I insist you take the bedroom." He gestured to one of the doors. "I will make do out here by the fire. It would not be right otherwise, not until we are properly married." Adelaide wanted to argue, but she could see the determination in his face. This was important to him, this matter of propriety and respect. So she nodded and sipped her tea, feeling the warmth spread through her. They spent the evening in careful conversation, learning about each other in starts and stops. Nathan told her about his ranch, the 50 head of cattle he was running, his plans to expand in the spring. Adelaide told him about Boston, about her father who had been a clerk and taught her to read and figure, about the aunt who had given her a home but never warmth. "I am sorry about your father," Nathan said quietly. "Mine passed 5 years ago and I still miss him. He was a good man, taught me the value of honest work and keeping your word. My father was like that too, Adelaide said. He always said a person's character was shown in how they treated those who could do nothing for them. A wise man. Nathan poked at the fire, sending sparks spiraling up the chimney. I hope I can live up to his daughter's expectations. I think you will, Adelaide said softly. As the evening wore on and full dark fell outside, the storm continued to rage. The wind howled around the house, rattling the shutters and finding every tiny crack to whistle through. But inside it was warm and growing warmer, not just from the fire but from the tentative connection forming between two lonely people who had taken a chance on each other. Finally, Adelaide could no longer stifle her yawns and Nathan noticed. You must be exhausted from your journey, he said. Please take the bedroom. There are extra quilts in the chest at the foot of the bed if you need them. Adelaide stood, clutching the quilt around her shoulders. Thank you, Nathan, for everything, for coming to meet me, for bringing me here safely, for being kind. He stood as well, and for a moment they faced each other in the firelight. I am the one who should thank you, he said, for taking a chance on a stranger, for coming all this way on nothing but letters and faith. I promise you, Adelaide, I will do everything in my power to make you happy here. I believe you, she said, and she did. The bedroom was small but comfortable, with a wide bed covered in a thick quilt, a dresser, and a chair by the window. Adelaide could hear the storm raging outside, but in here she felt safe and sheltered. She changed into her nightgown, shivering briefly in the cold air before burrowing under the covers. As she lay in the dark, listening to the occasional sound of Nathan moving around in the main room, Adelaide thought about how much her life had changed in just one day. This morning she had woken up on a train, uncertain and afraid. Now she was in a stranger's home, preparing to marry him tomorrow. It should have terrified her, but instead she felt a curious sense of peace. There was something solid about Nathan, something trustworthy. The way he had looked at her, with respect and a growing warmth but no presumption. The way he had insisted on proper behavior despite the difficult circumstances. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. Adelaide pulled the quilt up to her chin and let herself imagine a future here. Children playing in front of the fire, helping Nathan with the ranch work. Building a life together, slowly transforming from strangers to partners to something more. She fell asleep with that image in her mind, and she slept better than she had in months. Morning came with a strange brightness filtering through the window, and Adelaide woke to silence. The wind had stopped. She rose and dressed quickly in the cold room, then opened the door to find Nathan already up, feeding the fire and putting coffee on to boil. Good morning, he said, turning to greet her. There was a slight awkwardness between them, the newness of the situation making them both a bit shy. The storm has passed. I checked outside. We got about a foot of snow, but the sky is clear now. So we could go to town, Adelaide asked, moving closer to the fire, if you are still willing. Nathan poured coffee into 2 cups. The road will be difficult, but the horses can manage it. I am willing, Adelaide said firmly. They ate a simple breakfast of bread and preserves, and then Adelaide returned to the bedroom to prepare for what would be her wedding day. She had brought one good dress, dark blue wool with black trim. It was not a wedding gown, but it would have to do. She pinned her dark blonde hair up carefully and pinched her cheeks to bring color to them. When she emerged, Nathan was wearing a clean shirt and had combed his hair back. He looked nervous, she realized, and somehow that made her feel better. He was not taking this lightly. This meant something to him too. The journey to town was slow, the horses pulling the wagon through deep snow, but the day was clear and bright, the sun reflecting off the white landscape in a way that made Adelaide squint. The mountains were stunning in the daylight, their peaks sharp against the blue sky. Aspen was small, just a main street with buildings on either side, but it was bustling despite the snow. Miners and ranchers and townspeople moved about their business, and several heads turned as Nathan drove the wagon down the street. "There will be talk," Nathan said quietly. "About you arriving, about us marrying so quickly." "Let them talk," Adelaide replied. "We know the truth of it." Nathan gave her a grateful look and stopped the wagon in front of a small white church. "The preacher lives in the house next door. Let me go speak with him." He returned a few minutes later with a short, balding man who was pulling on his coat as he walked. "Miss Reeves, I am Reverend Thomas," the man said, offering his hand. "Nathan tells me you would like to be married today." "Yes, sir," Adelaide confirmed. "Well then, let us get you two inside where it is warm and we can do this properly." The Reverend led them into the church, which was tiny but well kept, with wooden pews and a simple altar. "We will need witnesses," Reverend Thomas said. "Let me see if I can find a few folks." He disappeared back outside and returned a few minutes later with an older couple, the Harrisons, who ran the general store. "Congratulations," Mrs. Harrison said warmly, taking Adelaide's hands. "Nathan is a good man. You will be happy with him." "Thank you," Adelaide said, grateful for the kindness. The ceremony was simple and quick. Adelaide and Nathan stood before the altar, and Reverend Thomas read from his Bible about love and commitment and partnership. When it came time for the vows, Nathan took Adelaide's hands in his, and she was struck by how warm they were, how steady. "I, Nathan Vaughn, take you, Adelaide Reeves, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he said, his voice strong and clear. "I promise to honor you, protect you, provide for you, and treat you with kindness all the days of my life." Adelaide's voice shook slightly as she repeated her own vows, but she meant every word. "I, Adelaide Reeves, take you, Nathan Vaughn, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to honor you, stand beside you, work with you, and be your true partner all the days of my life." "Do you have a ring?" Reverend Thomas asked. Nathan looked stricken. "I did not think to get one. With the storm and everything happening so fast, it slipped my mind." "Hold on, Mrs. Harrison bustled forward and pulled a simple gold band from her own finger. "This was my mother's. Use it for now, and when you can get into a bigger town, Nathan, you get this girl a proper ring of her own." "I could not," Adelaide protested, but Mrs. Harrison pressed the ring into Nathan's hand. "You can and you will. Now finish getting married before Reverend Thomas's toes freeze off." Nathan slipped the borrowed ring onto Adelaide's finger, and it fit almost perfectly. Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, and then there was a moment of awkwardness as everyone looked at Nathan expectantly. "You may kiss your bride," the Reverend prompted gently. Nathan leaned down, and Adelaide tilted her face up. Their lips met in a brief, soft kiss that somehow held a promise of more to come. Adelaide felt her heart flutter in her chest. They signed the marriage certificate, with the Harrisons witnessing, and then they were being congratulated and ushered back out into the cold sunshine. "Come to the store before you leave," Mrs. Harrison insisted. "I want to send you home with a few things." At the general store, Mrs. Harrison bustled about, gathering items despite Adelaide's protests. A bag of sugar, coffee beans, a tin of tea, some fabric, and a small jar of honey all went into a box. "For the newlyweds," she said firmly when Nathan tried to pay. "Welcome to Aspen, Adelaide. You come visit me when you get lonely out at that ranch." "I will," Adelaide promised, touched by the woman's generosity. "Thank you." The ride back to the ranch was quieter, both of them processing what had just happened. They were married now. Adelaide kept glancing at the ring on her finger, this symbol of the commitment they had just made. "Are you all right?" Nathan asked after a while. "No regrets, no regrets," Adelaide said firmly. "Are you? None at all." He reached over and took her hand, and they rode the rest of the way like that, hands linked, the winter sun bright on the snow around them. Back at the ranch, Nathan helped Adelaide down from the wagon, and there was a new awareness between them, a recognition of what marriage meant. Adelaide felt her cheeks warm as Nathan looked at her, his brown eyes dark with an emotion she was beginning to recognize as desire. "Welcome home, Mrs. Vaughn," he said softly. Adelaide's breath caught at hearing her new name. Mrs. Vaughn. She was married. This was her home now, and this man was her husband. They went inside, and the house felt different now, no longer a stranger's space but hers as well. Nathan built up the fire while Adelaide put away the supplies from Mrs. Harrison. They moved around each other carefully, both aware of the marriage bed that waited in the next room, both unsure how to navigate this next step. Finally, as afternoon faded into evening, Nathan took Adelaide's hand and led her to sit on the sofa near the fire. "I know this has all happened very fast," he said. "If you need time before our marriage is, that is to say, I will not pressure you." Adelaide looked at this man who had been a stranger 2 days ago and was now her husband. She thought about his kindness, his consideration, the way he had protected her reputation even at cost to himself. She thought about the promises they had made in the church, about the life she wanted to build here. "I am your wife," she said softly, "and I want to be your wife in every way." Nathan's eyes darkened and he cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. "You are sure?" "I am sure." He kissed her then, not the brief ceremonial kiss from the church, but something deeper, more urgent. Adelaide responded, leaning into him, her hands coming up to rest on his chest where she could feel his heart pounding. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan stood and offered his hand. "Come with me." Adelaide took his hand and let him lead her to the bedroom. The late afternoon sun slanted through the window, casting golden light across the bed. Nathan closed the door behind them, giving them privacy even though they were alone in the house. What happened next was tender and awkward and sweet, two people learning each other, discovering how to fit together. Nathan was gentle, constantly checking that Adelaide was all right, moving slowly and with care. There was some pain for Adelaide, but there was also pleasure and a deep sense of connection, of two becoming one. Afterward they lay tangled together under the quilts, Nathan's arm around Adelaide and her head on his chest. The room had grown dark, and outside the window, stars were beginning to appear. "I'll keep you warm always," Nathan murmured into her hair, pulling her closer. "I promise you that, Adelaide. You will never be cold or alone or uncared for, not as long as I draw breath." Adelaide felt tears prick her eyes at the simple sincerity in his voice. She had come west hoping for safety and stability, maybe respect if she was lucky. She had not dared to hope for affection, for tenderness, for a man who would promise to keep her warm always. "And I promise to make this house a home," she whispered back. "To stand beside you through whatever comes, to be your partner in truth." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, the fire burning low in the other room, the winter night cold outside but warmth cocooning them in their bed. The days that followed fell into a gentle rhythm. Adelaide learned the routines of the ranch, the daily tasks that kept things running. She discovered that she enjoyed the work, the physicality of it, the tangible results. She learned to milk the 2 cows Nathan kept, to gather eggs from the chickens, to bake bread in the cast iron oven. Nathan taught her to ride, putting her on his gentlest horse and leading her around the corral until she found her seat. She took a tumble once, landing hard in the snow, and Nathan was off his own horse in an instant, gathering her up with worry written across his face. Are you hurt?" His hands moved over her, checking for injuries. Adelaide started to laugh. She could not help it. The concern on his face, the snow in her hair, the absurdity of it all. "I am fine," she gasped between giggles. "Just startled." Nathan's worried expression melted into a grin. And then he was laughing too, and they stood there in the snow, holding each other and laughing like children. At night, they would sit by the fire, Adelaide mending clothes or working on curtains she was making from the fabric misses Harrison had given her, Nathan carving or mending tack. They talked about everything and nothing. Nathan told her about his childhood in Missouri, about the farm his father had worked. Adelaide told him about Boston, about the sea and the ships and the constant noise of the city. "You miss it?" Nathan asked one evening. "The city, I mean. The civilization." Adelaide considered the question carefully. "Sometimes I miss the convenience of it," she admitted. "The shops, the variety of goods. But I do not miss the crowding or the noise or the way everyone was always in everyone else's business." She looked up from her sewing. "And I do not miss being alone in a crowd, which is what Boston felt like after Father died." Nathan reached over and took her hand. "You are not alone anymore." "No," Adelaide agreed, squeezing his fingers. "I am not." Their physical relationship deepened and grew more comfortable as the days passed. Nathan was an attentive lover, learning what Adelaide liked, taking his time, making sure she found pleasure. Adelaide marveled at the intimacy of it, the way their bodies learned to communicate in ways words could not capture. One night, about 3 weeks after her arrival, Adelaide woke to find Nathan's side of the bed empty. She wrapped a quilt around herself and padded out into the main room to find him standing at the window, looking out at the moonlit snow. "What is wrong?" she asked softly. He turned, surprised. "I did not mean to wake you. I could not sleep." Adelaide came to stand beside him. "Tell me." Nathan was quiet for a long moment, then sighed. "I have been thinking about spring, about all the work that needs to be done. I want to expand the herd, maybe add some horses, but it will mean long days and hard work, and I worry about leaving you alone so much." "Nathan." Adelaide took his hand. "I knew this was a working ranch when I agreed to come. I'm not afraid of hard work, and I am not afraid of being alone sometimes. We will manage. You are remarkable, do you know that?" Nathan pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. "Most women would complain about the isolation, the difficulty." "I am not most women," Adelaide said. "And besides, I have plans of my own. I want to start a garden in the spring, a big one. And maybe we could get more chickens, start selling eggs in town. I could take in some sewing as well." "There is always work for a good seamstress." Nathan kissed the top of her head. "How did I get so lucky?" "I ask myself the same thing," Adelaide said, and she meant it. Winter deepened, and there were more storms, days when they were snowed in and could do nothing but keep the fire burning and care for the animals. On those days, Adelaide was grateful for Nathan's steady presence, for the safety of the solid house he had built. There were also beautiful days when the sun shone brilliant on fresh snow and the world seemed made of diamonds. On those days, Nathan would bundle Adelaide onto the wagon and they would drive over to the Morrison Ranch for a visit. The Morrisons were a family of 5, John and Mary Morrison and their 3 children, all boys ranging from 6 to 14. Mary Morrison was delighted to have another woman nearby and immediately took Adelaide under her wing. "It is not easy ranch life," Mary said as they sat in her warm kitchen, drinking coffee while the men talked outside. "But it is good life if you have got the right partner, and Nathan is good man, serious, sometimes too serious, but good heart." "He is very good to me," Adelaide agreed. "He was lonely before you came," Mary said. We tried to include him in family things, but you could see he was wanting his own family, his own wife. I am glad he found you." The two women became friends, and Adelaide looked forward to the visits, to having another woman to talk to. Mary taught her things about ranch life, about preserving food and treating common ailments and 100 other practical matters. January turned to February, and Adelaide began to suspect she might be carrying a child. She was not certain, not yet, but there were signs. Her monthly courses had not come, and she felt different, a certain tenderness and fatigue that had not been there before. She waited to tell Nathan, wanting to be sure, but also savoring the secret knowledge, the possibility growing inside her. One evening in late February, Adelaide was preparing supper when a wave of nausea hit her so strongly that she had to grip the edge of the table. Nathan, who had just come in from the barn, was at her side in an instant. "Adelaide, what is wrong?" His face was creased with worry. "I am all right," she managed. "Just a moment of dizziness." But Nathan was not fooled. He guided her to a chair and crouched beside her, his hand on her knee. "You have been tired lately, and now this. Are you ill? Should I ride for the doctor?" "No." Adelaide took his hand and placed it on her still flat belly. "Nathan, I think we are going to have a baby." The expression that crossed his face was one Adelaide would remember for the rest of her life. Shock, followed by wonder, followed by pure joy. "A baby, you are certain?" "Not completely certain, but fairly sure. I thought perhaps we could go see the doctor next time we are in town, just to confirm." Nathan pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "A baby," he whispered. "Adelaide, do you know what this means?" "We are going to be a family." "We already are a family," Adelaide said, but she was smiling. "Now we will just be a bigger one." That night, Nathan was impossibly gentle with her, treating her as if she were made of glass. Adelaide finally had to laugh and pull him to her. "I am not going to break." Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. "But this is our baby," Nathan said. "And you are my wife, and I will be as careful with you as I choose to be." The next week, they made the trip to town, and the doctor confirmed what Adelaide already knew. She was indeed expecting, probably due sometime in early autumn. "You are healthy and strong," Dr. Stevens said. "I do not foresee any problems, but you should take it easy as you get further along. No heavy lifting, plenty of rest." "I will make sure of it," Nathan said firmly. On the way home, Nathan could not stop talking about the baby, making plans, worrying out loud about all the things they would need. Adelaide listened, amused and touched by his enthusiasm. "We have months to prepare," she reminded him, "and babies need very little in the beginning. A cradle, some clothes, love, we can manage all of that." "I want to build a bigger house," Nathan said suddenly, "before the baby comes. Another bedroom, maybe two, and a bigger kitchen. You need more space." "Nathan, the house is fine," Adelaide protested. "It is not fine. It is a bachelor's cabin. Our child deserves better. Our children, plural, deserve better." He took her hand. "Let me do this, Adelaide. Let me build us a proper home." She looked at his earnest face and felt her heart swell with love for this man. "All right," she agreed. "Build us a home." As March arrived and the first hints of spring began to show, Nathan threw himself into planning the house expansion. He spent evenings sketching out designs, calculating what materials he would need. John Morrison came over to help with the planning, and soon it became a joint project, with John and his oldest son Thomas helping with the building. Meanwhile, Adelaide focused on preparing for the baby. She cut up old clothes to make nappies and nightgowns. Mary Morrison gave her a stack of baby things her boys had outgrown. Mrs. Harrison from the general store, when she heard the news on one of Adelaide and Nathan's visits to town, pressed a soft yellow blanket into Adelaide's hands. "My daughter made it," she said. tears in her eyes. She passed 2 years ago in childbirth. I have been saving this, hoping to give it to someone who would use it well. I think you will. Adelaide hugged the older woman, moved by the gift and the trust it represented. I will treasure it always. As her belly began to swell with the growing life inside her, Adelaide found herself marveling at the changes in her body, in her life. A year ago she had been trapped and miserable in Boston, seeing no way forward. Now she was married to a good man, carrying his child, helping to build a home and a life in this wild, beautiful place. The construction began in April, as soon as the ground thawed enough. Nathan and John Morrison worked long hours, and the house began to transform. They built 2 new bedrooms off the main room, expanded the kitchen, and added a small room that could serve as Nathan's office or, someday, a schoolroom. Adelaide watched it all with wonder, seeing their home grow, seeing the physical manifestation of Nathan's love and commitment. He came to bed each night exhausted and covered in sawdust, but happy, with the satisfaction of good work done. By June, the expansion was complete, and Adelaide spent a happy week arranging their enlarged home. The new kitchen had more counter space and better storage. The new master bedroom was larger, with room for a big dresser and a rocking chair by the window. And the nursery, the small room off the master bedroom, was perfect, with a cradle Nathan had built himself sitting ready for its tiny occupant. "It is beautiful," Adelaide said, standing in the doorway of the nursery, one hand on her rounded belly. "All of it. Thank you, Nathan." He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her, his hands covering hers on her belly. "Thank you," he said, "for coming here, for taking a chance on me, for giving me this family. I love you, Adelaide." It was the first time he had said those words out loud, though Adelaide had felt them in his actions for months. Her eyes filled with tears as she turned in his arms. "I love you too," she whispered. "So much. More than I ever thought possible." They kissed there in the doorway of their unborn child's room, and Adelaide felt completely, perfectly happy. Summer on the ranch was busy and beautiful. Adelaide's garden flourished, providing fresh vegetables for their table and plenty to preserve for winter. Nathan's herd was thriving, and he had indeed acquired several horses, including a gentle mare he swore would be perfect for Adelaide once the baby was born, and she was ready to ride again. As July turned to August and Adelaide grew larger and more uncomfortable in the heat, Nathan became increasingly protective. He would barely let her lift a dish, let alone do any heavy work. "Nathan, I am pregnant, not dying," Adelaide said with exasperation one afternoon when he had taken a basket of laundry from her hands. "I need to keep moving. The doctor said so." "You can move without carrying heavy, wet laundry," Nathan said stubbornly. "I will hang it. You can sit in the shade and direct me." Adelaide rolled her eyes but could not help smiling. His concern was excessive but came from love. She settled into a chair under the big cottonwood tree near the house and watched as her husband, this tough rancher who could wrestle a cow, carefully hung her laundry to dry. In late August, Adelaide woke in the middle of the night to a strange sensation, a tightening across her belly that made her gasp. She lay still for a moment, wondering, and then it came again, stronger this time. "Nathan," she said, shaking his shoulder. "Nathan, wake up." He was awake instantly, sitting up in alarm. "What is it? What is wrong?" "I think the baby is coming." Nathan went pale in the moonlight streaming through the window. "Now, but it is early. You said September." "Babies come when they are ready, not when we expect them." Another contraction hit, and Adelaide breathed through it. "You need to ride to the Morrisons and ask Mary to come, and send Thomas for the doctor." Nathan leaped out of bed and began pulling on clothes, his movements jerky with nerves. Adelaide would have laughed if another contraction had not stolen her breath. Nathan. She waited until he looked at her. It will be all right. Women do this every day, but you need to hurry. He leaned down and kissed her fiercely. I will be as fast as I can. Do not have this baby without me. I will do my best, Adelaide promised. After Nathan thundered out the door, Adelaide got up and began to pace, remembering what Mary had told her about labor. Walk as long as you can, she had said. Movement helps the baby come. The contractions were still far apart, and Adelaide was grateful for that. She had time. She changed into an old nightgown, put towels and water near the bed, made sure the baby clothes were ready. Keeping busy helped with the fear that was trying to creep in at the edges. It seemed like hours, but was probably less than one before she heard the wagon outside. Mary Morrison came bustling in, all efficiency, with Nathan close behind her looking terrified. How far apart are the pains? Mary asked, helping Adelaide back to the bedroom. About 10 minutes, I think. Good. We have time. Mary turned to Nathan. You need to heat more water and then stay out of the way. First babies take a while. Nathan looked like he wanted to argue, but Mary fixed him with a stern look and he retreated to the kitchen. As the night wore on and Adelaide's labor progressed, Mary was a steady, comforting presence. She rubbed Adelaide's back during contractions, helped her walk, encouraged her when Adelaide thought she could not go on. Nathan periodically appeared in the doorway, his face drawn with worry, only to be shooed away by Mary. But Adelaide could hear him pacing in the other room, and somehow his presence, even at a distance, gave her strength. Dawn was breaking when the doctor finally arrived, and by then Adelaide was deep in the throes of hard labor. The contractions were constant, overwhelming, and she gripped Mary's hand so hard she thought she might break the older woman's fingers. You are doing wonderfully, Dr. Stevens said after examining her. It will not be much longer now. I cannot, Adelaide gasped. It is too much. You can and you will, Mary said firmly. You are strong, Adelaide. You can do this. The sun was fully up when Adelaide finally felt the overwhelming urge to push. Dr. Stevens and Mary coached her through it, and Adelaide bore down with everything she had, desperate to meet this child she had been carrying, desperate for the pain to end. I can see the head, Dr. Stevens said. One more big push, Adelaide. Adelaide heard Nathan's voice from the other room. You can do this, Adelaide. I love you. You can do this. With his words ringing in her ears, Adelaide gathered every ounce of strength she had left and pushed. There was a moment of incredible pressure and then release, and suddenly the room was filled with a baby's cry. A boy, Dr. Stevens announced, holding up the squalling infant. You have a son. Adelaide fell back against the pillows, exhausted and elated. A son. They had a son. Mary quickly cleaned the baby and wrapped him in the yellow blanket from Mrs. Harrison, then placed him in Adelaide's arms. Adelaide looked down at the tiny red face, the dark hair plastered to his head, the miniature hands waving in agitation, and felt her heart expand in a way she had not known was possible. Nathan, she called, her voice hoarse. You can come in now. Nathan appeared in the doorway, and his eyes immediately found Adelaide and the baby. He crossed the room in 3 strides and sank onto the bed beside them, his hand shaking as he reached out to touch his son's cheek. He is perfect, Nathan whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Adelaide, he is perfect. You are perfect. Thank you, thank you. What will you call him? Mary asked, smiling at the little family. Adelaide and Nathan had discussed names but had not decided. Now, looking at her husband's face, soft with wonder and love, Adelaide knew. Nicholas, she said. Nicholas Vaughn, after his father. Nathan's eyes met hers, full of love and gratitude and joy. Nicholas, he agreed. It is perfect. The next weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and constant feeding and the overwhelming reality of caring for a tiny human being. Adelaide was exhausted but happier than she had ever been. Nathan was a devoted father, walking the floor with Nicholas when he cried, changing nappies without complaint, marveling at every tiny sound and expression. "I cannot believe we made him," Nathan said one night, holding his sleeping son against his chest. "That he is ours." "We did indeed," Adelaide said, watching them from the bed. Father and son, both with the same dark hair, the same stubborn chin. Her family. As September turned to October and the leaves began to turn gold, Adelaide healed and grew stronger. She found her rhythm with the baby, learning his cues and needs. Mary Morrison visited often, helping and advising and becoming more than a friend, becoming like the sister Adelaide had never had. One crisp October morning, Adelaide woke to find Nathan already up, standing by the window with Nicholas in his arms. The baby was awake and alert, and Nathan was talking to him softly, pointing out the window at the mountains. "Your mother came here almost a year ago," Nathan was saying. "In the winter, in a terrible storm. And I knew from the moment I saw her that my life was about to change. She was so brave, coming all this way to marry a stranger. And she has made this house a home, made me a husband and a father, given me everything I ever wanted but was afraid to hope for." Adelaide felt tears prick her eyes. She stayed quiet, not wanting to interrupt. "And now you are here," Nathan continued, "and the circle is complete. We are a family, Nicholas. And I promise you, I will do everything in my power to be a good father to you, to teach you about honor and hard work and how to treat people with respect. But most importantly, I will teach you about love, because your mother taught me that love is the thing that makes everything else worthwhile." Adelaide could not stay quiet anymore. "Nathan," he turned and his face broke into a smile when he saw she was awake. "Good morning, did we wake you?" "No." She held out her arms and he brought Nicholas to her. The baby rooted immediately for her breast and she settled him to nurse. "I heard what you said, to Nicholas." Nathan sat on the edge of the bed. "I meant every word." "I know you did." Adelaide reached out and took his hand. "And I want you to know that you have taught me about love too. Before I came here, I thought love was something practical, something convenient. I thought marriage was about security and companionship, but you have shown me it is so much more than that. Adelaide." Nathan leaned in and kissed her softly. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me." They sat together in the morning light, their son nursing contentedly, and Adelaide thought about the journey that had brought her here. The cold winter arrival, the fear and uncertainty, the gradual unfolding of love. The promise Nathan had made that first night, to keep her warm always, had been fulfilled in ways that went far beyond the physical. The first year of Nicholas's life passed in a beautiful blur. He grew from a helpless infant to a curious, active baby who crawled everywhere and pulled himself up on furniture. Nathan built a pen to keep him contained when Adelaide needed to work, but Nicholas was not content to stay in one place for long. "He has your determination," Nathan said one evening, rescuing a plant from Nicholas's grabbing hands for the third time. "And your stubbornness," Adelaide retorted, but she was smiling. Ranch life continued around them. Nathan's operation was thriving, and he hired a young man named Samuel to help with the work. This gave him more time at home with Adelaide and Nicholas, time he treasured. The second winter in their marriage was easier than the first, though no less harsh. They were prepared now, with plenty of food stored and firewood stacked high. And they had Nicholas, who kept them entertained with his antics and warmed them with his presence. One evening in January, as they sat by the fire watching Nicholas play with wooden blocks Nathan had made him, Adelaide made an announcement. "Nathan, I have something to tell you." He looked up from the piece of leather he was working. "What is it?" Adelaide smiled. "We are going to have another baby." Nathan's face went through the same progression of emotions as the first time, shock to wonder to joy. Then he was beside her, pulling her into his arms. "Are you happy?" Adelaide asked, though she knew the answer from his reaction. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Nathan said. "Adelaide, you have given me everything. A home, a son, and now another child. How did I ever deserve you?" "By being exactly who you are," Adelaide said simply. Their second child, a daughter they named Abigail Rose, was born in September during a thunderstorm. The birth was easier than the first, and Adelaide recovered quickly. Nathan was besotted with his daughter, and watching him with her, so gentle and protective, made Adelaide fall in love with him all over again. Nicholas, now almost 2, was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to touch her and bring her things. "Jenny," he called her, unable to quite manage Abigail, and the nickname stuck. 2 years later, another son arrived, and they named him Henry. Then, after a gap of 3 years, twin girls, Emma and Sarah. Their house, which had seemed so large when they first expanded it, now felt full to bursting with the noise and chaos of 5 children. But it was a good chaos, a happy chaos. Adelaide had never imagined she would have such a large family, but she could not imagine her life any other way. Each child was a miracle, a gift, a piece of the love she and Nathan shared made manifest. Nathan added on to the house again, building more bedrooms upstairs, creating space for their growing family. The ranch prospered, and they were able to hire more help, which gave Nathan more time with his children, time he valued above all else. As the years passed, their love deepened and matured. The initial passionate intensity settled into something steadier but no less profound. They knew each other completely, could communicate with a glance, moved through their days in comfortable synchrony. Adelaide watched silver begin to thread through Nathan's dark hair, saw lines form around his eyes. She knew she was changing too, her body marked by the children she had carried and birthed. But when Nathan looked at her, she saw the same love and desire in his eyes that had been there on their wedding night. "You are beautiful," he told her one night as they lay in bed, the house finally quiet with all the children asleep. "I am a mother of 5, Adelaide said. "I have not been beautiful in years." "You have never been more beautiful," Nathan insisted. "Every mark on your body is a testament to the life we have built, to our children, to our love." "How could that be anything but beautiful?" Adelaide kissed him then. This man who still, after all these years, had the power to make her heart race. Nicholas grew into a serious, responsible boy who loved working with his father on the ranch. He had Nathan's quiet strength and Adelaide's quick mind, and it was clear he would be a rancher like his father. Abigail was bright and curious, always asking questions, always wanting to know how things worked. She followed Nathan around whenever he would let her, absorbing everything he taught her about the land and the animals. Henry was the wild one, always getting into mischief, always testing boundaries. But he had a sweet heart and was fiercely protective of his younger sisters. The twins, Emma and Sarah, were inseparable, speaking in that mysterious way twins have, finishing each other's sentences. They were still young, but already their distinct personalities were emerging. Adelaide looked at her children sometimes and marveled that they were hers, that she and Nathan had created these unique, individual people. It was the greatest accomplishment of her life. As the children grew older, Adelaide started taking in sewing again, work she could do at home. She was skilled and word spread. Soon she had more work than she could handle, women from Aspen and the surrounding ranches bringing her their mending and their special projects. The extra money was useful, but Adelaide found she enjoyed the work for its own sake, enjoyed the creativity and the skill required. And she liked the connection it gave her to other women, the conversations that happened as she pinned a hem or measured for a new dress. "You could open a shop in town," Mary Morrison suggested one day. "A proper dress shop. You are good enough." Adelaide considered it but shook her head. "Maybe someday when the children are older, but for now I want to be here at home. These years go so fast." And they did. It seemed like one day Nicholas was a baby in her arms, and the next he was a young man of 18, as tall as his father, helping to run the ranch. Abigail was 16 and beautiful, with a line of young men suddenly interested in calling. Henry at 14 was finally settling down, channeling his energy into working with the horses. The twins were 11, still young enough to be children but starting to show glimpses of the women they would become. Adelaide, now in her late 30s, looked back on her life with satisfaction. The frightened young woman who had stepped off that train in the winter of 1883 seemed like a different person. That Adelaide had been hoping for safety, for security. She had found so much more. One evening, as she and Nathan sat on the porch watching the sunset, Nicholas and Henry working in the corral and the girls playing in the yard, Adelaide leaned her head on Nathan's shoulder. "Happy?" he asked, as he had so many times over the years. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Adelaide answered honestly. "When I got on that train in Boston, I was so scared. I had no idea what I was getting into, no idea who you would be. I was just desperate for a way out. And now," Nathan's arm came around her shoulders, "now I cannot imagine being anywhere else or with anyone else. You kept your promise, Nathan. You have kept me warm always, not just physically but in every way that matters. You have given me a home, a family, a life full of love and meaning. I am so grateful I took that chance." "I am the grateful one," Nathan said. "You could have married anyone, Adelaide. You did not have to choose a poor rancher in the middle of nowhere. But you did, and you transformed my life. Before you, I was just existing, going through the motions. You gave me a reason to live, to build, to hope. You and our children are everything to me." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold. Then Abigail called that supper was ready, and they went inside to their warm, noisy, chaotic, perfect home. The years continued to pass. Nicholas married a girl from town, a sweet young woman named Clara, and they built a house on the far edge of the property. He continued to work the ranch with Nathan, and Adelaide saw the quiet pride in her husband's eyes as he watched their son step into his role as a man. A year later, Nicholas and Clara had their first child, a girl they named Rose Adelaide, and Adelaide held her granddaughter and marveled at the circle of life. She was a grandmother now, no longer young but certainly not old either, still vital and active. Nathan's hair had gone completely silver, but he was still strong, still working the ranch every day. The years of hard work showed in his weathered face and work-roughened hands, but to Adelaide, he was still the most handsome man she had ever seen. Abigail announced her engagement to a young schoolteacher who had come to Aspen, a good man who clearly adored her. The wedding was planned for June, and Adelaide threw herself into preparations, sewing her daughter's wedding dress with love and care. On the day of Abigail's wedding, as Adelaide helped her daughter dress, she remembered her own wedding day, the hasty ceremony with a borrowed ring, the uncertainty and hope mixed together. "Are you nervous?" she asked Abigail. "A little," her daughter admitted, "but mostly excited." "James is a good man, Mother, like Father." "Yes, he is," Adelaide agreed. "And I think you will be very happy together. But remember, marriage is work. It is choosing each other every day through the good times and the hard times. It is building a life together, brick by brick, day by day. Like you and father, Abigail said softly. Like your father and me, Adelaide confirmed. At the wedding, Adelaide stood beside Nathan and watched their daughter marry. She felt him take her hand and she squeezed back, this silent communication they had perfected over the years. So much joy, so much love, and it had all started with a leap of faith on a cold winter day. Henry announced his intention to join the cavalry, and while Adelaide's heart clenched with fear at the thought of her wild boy in the military, she supported his decision. Nathan took him aside for a long talk, and whatever was said between father and son, Henry left the conversation standing taller, more mature. The twins were growing into lovely young women, different as night and day but still close. Emma wanted to go to college to study and learn. Sarah wanted to stay on the ranch to raise horses. Adelaide supported both dreams, proud of her daughter's independence and determination. As Adelaide entered her 40s, she found herself settling into a new phase of life. The constant demands of young children were behind her. Nicholas was running the ranch alongside Nathan. Abigail was married with a home of her own. Henry was away with the cavalry. The twins were nearly grown. There was more time now, time to sit and watch the sunset, time to work on her sewing without interruption, time to simply be with Nathan. They took rides together in the evenings, just the two of them, rediscovering the quiet companionship of early marriage. "Sometimes I miss when they were little," Adelaide confessed one evening. "The chaos, the noise, the house feels so quiet now." "They are building their own lives," Nathan said. "That is what we raised them to do, and they are not so far away. Nicholas is just across the property and Abigail visits nearly every week." "I know," Adelaide said, "and I am proud of them, truly. It is just strange, after so many years of being needed constantly, to have time to myself." "Then we will have to find new ways to spend that time," Nathan said with a smile that made him look years younger. "I have some ideas." Adelaide laughed and spurred her horse forward. "Race you home," she called over her shoulder. She heard Nathan's laugh behind her, and the thunder of his horse's hooves as he chased after her. They raced across the land they had built their life on. No longer young but not old either. Still in love, still partners, still the best decision each other had ever made. When Nathan turned 50, the whole family gathered for a celebration. Nicholas and Clara came with their 3 children now, 2 girls and a boy. Abigail and James came with their infant son. Henry was home on leave from the cavalry, handsome in his uniform. The twins were there, Emma home from her first year of college, Sarah already running a successful horse breeding operation on a portion of the ranch. Adelaide looked around the expanded house, now filled with 3 generations, and felt overwhelming gratitude. All of this, all these people, this love and life and connection, had started with a frightened woman stepping off a train and a lonely man who had promised to keep her warm. "What are you thinking?" Nathan asked quietly, coming to stand beside her as she watched their children and grandchildren. "That we did all right," Adelaide said. "You and me. We built something good here." "We built something great," Nathan corrected. He pulled her close and she rested her head on his chest, hearing the steady beat of his heart. "Thank you, Adelaide. For saying yes, for taking that train, for building this life with me. You are my greatest blessing." "And you are mine," Adelaide whispered back. As the evening wore on and the candles were lit against the darkness, Adelaide found herself thinking about that first night in this house. She had been so cold, so uncertain, so alone. And Nathan had built up the fire and wrapped her in blankets and promised to keep her warm always. It had been such a simple promise, but he had kept it in every way possible. He had kept her physically warm, yes, building fires and adding onto the house and always making sure she had what she needed. But more than that, he had kept her heart warm with his love, had given her a home and a family and a purpose. She had kept her own promises too, had made this house a home, had stood beside him through hard times and good, had been his true partner in every sense of the word. Years continued to pass, bringing more grandchildren, bringing gray to Adelaide's hair and deeper lines to Nathan's face. But they weathered it together, as they had weathered everything. When Adelaide turned 50, Nathan gave her a gift, a beautiful ring with a small diamond, to replace the borrowed band she had worn for so many years. "I should have done this decades ago," he said as he slipped it on her finger. "You have deserved better than a borrowed ring all this time." Adelaide looked at the ring sparkling on her finger, then at the man who had given it to her. "The ring never mattered," she said softly. "All that ever mattered was you, was us, was the promises we made. But it is beautiful, and I will treasure it. Thank you, Nathan." They celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary with a party that filled the house and spilled into the yard. Their children toasted them, their grandchildren performed songs and skits. Mary Morrison, now in her 70s, gave a speech about young love and lasting love and how lucky Adelaide and Nathan were to have found each other. That night, alone in their bedroom, Nathan and Adelaide lay in the bed they had shared for 3 decades. 30 years, Adelaide marveled. "It has gone so fast. And yet I remember every moment," Nathan said. "I remember the first time I saw you on that train platform, looking so scared and so brave. I remember our wedding day, how you agreed to marry me immediately so I would not have to sleep in the barn." Adelaide laughed. "That seems like a lifetime ago." "It was a lifetime ago, a whole life built between then and now." Nathan pulled her close. "And I would not change a single moment of it. Well, maybe I would have bought you a proper ring sooner." "Everything was perfect exactly as it was," Adelaide said firmly. "We have had a good life, Nathan. A very good life." "We have," he agreed. "And we still have more life ahead of us." They did have more years, years of watching grandchildren grow and helping the younger generation build their own lives. Nicholas took over running the ranch entirely, allowing Nathan to finally slow down. He still worked, still rode out every day to check on things, but the weight of responsibility had shifted. Adelaide continued her sewing, now more for pleasure than necessity. She made quilts for each grandchild, intricate patterns that told the story of their family. She worked in her garden, larger now than ever, and canned and preserved. But mostly, she and Nathan simply enjoyed each other. They took long walks in the evening, visited with neighbors and family, sat on the porch and watched the mountains change with the seasons. When Nathan turned 60, Adelaide threw him a party. All their children came and all the grandchildren, and half the county besides. Nathan gave a speech, his voice still strong, his eyes still bright. "I am a wealthy man," he said, looking out at the crowd. "Not in money, though we have enough, but in the things that truly matter. I have good land that has provided for my family. I have children who make me proud every single day. I have grandchildren who bring me joy. And I have a wife who has been my partner, my best friend, my love for 33 years. Adelaide, come here." Adelaide rose and went to stand beside him, and he took her hand. "This woman came to me in the winter," Nathan said, his voice thick with emotion. "A mail-order bride who had every reason to be afraid but was brave anyway. And from that first night, I promised to keep her warm always. It has been my honor and privilege to keep that promise, to build a life with her, to love her more with each passing day. Adelaide, you are the best part of my life. You always have been." There was not a dry eye in the crowd, and Adelaide's own vision was blurred with tears. "I love you," she whispered, and Nathan kissed her there in front of everyone, a kiss that held 33 years of love and partnership and devotion. The party went late into the night, with music and dancing and laughter. Adelaide danced with Nathan, with her sons, with her grandsons. She watched her family, this vast network of love that had started with two strangers and a promise, and felt complete. More years passed, bringing the joys and sorrows that come with a long life. Mary Morrison passed away peacefully in her sleep, and Adelaide mourned the loss of her dear friend. But she celebrated too, celebrated a life well lived and a friendship that had sustained her through decades. More grandchildren were born, and Adelaide marveled that she could still feel such wonder at new life. Great-grandchildren began to arrive, and Adelaide found herself with the title of great-grandmother, a role she embraced with joy. Nathan's health began to decline in his late 60s. Nothing dramatic but a gradual slowing down. Adelaide cared for him tenderly, and he accepted her care with grace, though she knew it frustrated him to need help. "I am supposed to be taking care of you," he said one day when Adelaide brought him medicine for the pain in his joints. "And you have, for 40 years," Adelaide said firmly. "Now it is my turn. We are partners, Nathan. That means we take care of each other." On their 40th wedding anniversary, they had a quiet celebration, just family. Nathan was too tired for a big party, though he insisted he was fine. Adelaide knew better, knew that he was failing, knew that their time together was growing short, but she did not let him see her fear. Instead, she focused on gratitude, on savoring every moment they had left. That evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Nathan took her hand. "I have been thinking about that first winter," he said softly. "When you arrived in that storm and I brought you here and I built up the fire. Do you remember what I said?" "You said you would keep me warm always," Adelaide said, her voice catching. "And I have done my best," Nathan said. "But Adelaide, I need to know that when I am gone you will still be warm. I need to know that our children will take care of you, that you will not be alone." "Nathan, do not talk like that." Adelaide tried to keep her voice steady. "I need to say it," Nathan insisted. "Adelaide, you have been the love of my life. Every good thing I have ever had, every moment of joy, every accomplishment, it all comes back to you. You saved me from a lonely life. You gave me a family. You made every day worth living. And I need you to know that when my time comes, I will go peacefully because I know I loved you well and was loved well in return." Adelaide was crying now, unable to hold back the tears. "I cannot imagine life without you." "You will not have to for a while yet," Nathan said, pulling her close. "I am not gone yet, but when I am, you will go on because you are strong. You came all this way on faith alone, Adelaide. You survived and thrived in this wild place. You raised 5 children and helped build a ranch and created a legacy. You will survive without me too." "But I do not want to," Adelaide whispered. "I know, and I do not want to leave you, but someday one of us will have to go first. And if it is me, I need you to promise that you will keep living, will keep finding joy, will keep being surrounded by this family we built." He cupped her face in his weathered hands. "Promise me." "I promise," Adelaide said, though the words felt like they were being torn from her. "But you promise me something too. Promise me you will fight to stay as long as you can." "I promise," Nathan said. "I will fight for every day with you." And he did. He lived another 3 years, years of gradual decline but also of deep connection. Adelaide rarely left his side, and their children and grandchildren visited often. The great-grandchildren played in the yard, and Nathan watched them from his chair, a smile on his face. He died on a cold winter night, peacefully in his sleep with Adelaide beside him. She woke to find him gone, and the grief that crashed over her was like nothing she had ever experienced. This man who had been her partner for 43 years, who had kept his promise to keep her warm always, was gone. The funeral was huge, with people coming from all over the county to pay their respects. Nathan had been a respected man, a good neighbor, a pillar of the community. But to Adelaide, he had been so much more. He had been her salvation, her love, her life. The weeks after his death were dark ones. Adelaide moved through them in a fog, doing what needed to be done but feeling hollow inside. Her children worried, urged her to come stay with one of them, but Adelaide refused. "This is my home," she told Nicholas. "Your father and I built it together. I will not leave it." Slowly, painfully, Adelaide began to heal. She found comfort in her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, in the legacy she and Nathan had created together. She spent time in the garden Nathan had always loved, feeling close to him there. She sewed a final quilt, one that told the story of their life together, from that cold winter day to his peaceful passing. And she remembered his words, his insistence that she keep living, keep finding joy. So she did. She joined a church group, made new friends, traveled to see Emma in the city where she taught at a university. She babysat great-grandchildren and taught them to sew and told them stories about their great-grandfather. One winter day, 5 years after Nathan's death, Adelaide was visited by her granddaughter Rose, Nicholas's oldest. "Grandmother, can I ask you something?" Rose said as they sat together by the fire. "Of course, dear. How did you do it? How did you build such a beautiful life with great-grandfather when you started with nothing, when you did not even know each other?" Adelaide thought about the question, looking back over nearly 50 years. "We chose each other," she said finally. "Every single day we chose each other. We chose to work together, to be kind to each other, to build something bigger than ourselves. And we kept the promises we made, even when it was hard." "What promises?" Rose asked. "Your great-grandfather promised to keep me warm always," Adelaide said softly. "And he did, in every way that mattered. And I promised to stand beside him, to make our house a home, to be his true partner. We kept those promises, and everything else grew from there." Rose was quiet for a moment, then said, "I want that, the kind of love you and great-grandfather had." "Then choose wisely," Adelaide advised. "Choose someone who will keep their promises, someone who will choose you back every day. Choose someone you can build a life with, not just fall in love with. The falling is easy. The building is what matters." Adelaide lived to be 82, still active and engaged until the very end. She passed away peacefully in her sleep, in the house she and Nathan had built, surrounded by evidence of the life they had created together. At her funeral, Nicholas stood and spoke about his parents, about the love story that had started with a mail-order bride and a promise made by firelight. "My father promised to keep my mother warm always," Nicholas said, his voice carrying to the packed church. "And he kept that promise every day of their life together. But what I realized as I grew older was that my mother made the same promise to him. She kept him warm with her love, her partnership, her presence. They kept each other warm, and that warmth spread to all of us, to everyone they touched. That is their legacy, not just the land or the family, but the love. The deep, abiding, daily renewed love that they chose every single day." Adelaide was buried next to Nathan on a hill overlooking the ranch, under the mountains she had grown to love. The headstone was simple: Adelaide Reeves Vaughn, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. But Nicholas had added one more line at the bottom: she was always warm. The ranch continued, passed down through generations. The house still stood, expanded and updated, but fundamentally the same: shelter for a growing family. And on cold winter nights, when the fire burned in the hearth and the family gathered around, someone would always tell the story of how it all began. about a frightened young woman who stepped off a train into a blizzard, and a lonely cowboy who promised to keep her warm, about a hasty marriage and a slow-growing love, about two people who chose each other and built a life and kept their promises. And always, the story would end the same way, with the words that had started it all, the words that had shaped a life and created a legacy. "I will keep you warm always." And he had and she had, and their warmth continued, spreading out through children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, a fire that would never go out, lit that first winter night and tended carefully through a lifetime of love.